If you have encountered your twin flame, you are likely facing a very specific kind of inner disturbance, one that does not resemble ordinary attraction, heartbreak, or longing. Your thoughts return to this person relentlessly. Their face, their words, the moment you met, and even imagined futures replay in your mind without permission. Whether you are in reunion, separation, or experiencing the painful unraveling of the ego, your mental space feels occupied by them in a way that defies logic. This constant rumination can feel unsettling, even frightening. You may ask yourself why someone you have known for such a short time can dominate your inner world so completely. You may worry that you are losing control, becoming emotionally dependent, or trapped in fantasy. From a psychological perspective, it looks like obsession. From the inside, it feels like something far deeper, an invisible force pulling at your awareness, disrupting your routines, and refusing to be ignored. This is the problem most twin flames silently struggle with: the fear that something is wrong with them, when in truth, something profound has been activated within them. In today's video, we will dismantle the idea that this obsession is a weakness, a mistake, or a sign of emotional instability. Instead, we will explore why this mental fixation arises specifically within the twin flame connection, and why it appears differently during reunion, separation, and ego collapse. You will learn how the mind responds when a soul-level mirror is activated, why memory loops intensify, why the nervous system becomes hyper-focused, and why the psyche clings to the physical form of the twin in the 3D world. We will bridge psychology and spirituality to show you that what feels like obsession is actually a communication signal from the deeper self. This video will help you understand what your mind is trying to process, what your soul is trying to integrate, and why this connection refuses to be reduced to ordinary explanations. Most importantly, it will clarify what this obsession is asking of you, rather than what it is doing to you. By the end of this video, you will no longer view your fixation on your twin flame as something to suppress or escape. Instead, you will recognize it as a threshold, a moment where consciousness is being stretched beyond its previous limits. Understanding the purpose of this obsession allows it to loosen its grip, not through force, but through awareness. This shift changes everything. Confusion gives way to clarity. Fear softens into curiosity. Self-judgment is replaced with self-trust. When you understand why the obsession exists, you stop fighting it, and in doing so, it begins to transform. This video is not here to feed the obsession. It is here to decode it. And once you understand the message behind the signal, you will never experience the twin flame journey the same way again. Section 1: Obsession in the First Separation. During the first separation, often unfolding within the initial weeks or first 2 months after meeting your twin, the psychological experience can feel disorienting and consuming. From a clinical perspective, this stage often presents as heightened rumination, emotional preoccupation, and a persistent mental loop that seems disproportionate to the length of time you have known this person. You may catch yourself asking the same question repeatedly. Why am I thinking about someone I barely know as if they have always been part of me? The intensity can feel unsettling, even alarming, because it contradicts everything the rational mind expects from a brief encounter. This is typically the moment when individuals begin searching desperately for answers, sensing that what has occurred cannot be explained by ordinary attraction, projection, or attachment alone. Beneath the surface of this mental fixation is not pathology, weakness, or emotional instability. What is taking place is energetic recognition. On a deeper level of consciousness, your system has encountered a frequency that mirrors its own. Energy has recognized itself through another form. This recognition happens instantaneously and outside of linear time, yet the ego, the structure responsible for identity, safety, and narrative coherence, has no existing framework to process such an experience. When the ego encounters something that exceeds its conceptual limits, it reacts not with understanding, but with compulsive analysis. It searches for explanations, stories, and justifications that might restore a sense of control. Because the ego cannot directly accept a truth that dissolves separation, it turns inward and begins to ruminate. The mind loops, revisits conversations, replays moments, and imagines future outcomes not because it is attached to the person, but because it is attempting to translate an energetic event into language, memory, and logic. From a psychological lens, this looks like obsession. From a spiritual lens, it is the nervous system responding to a recognition that bypassed cognition entirely. The mind is working overtime to catch up to something the energy already knows. Obsession, at this stage, is not a desire for the other person. It is the ego's effort to interpret a non-linear truth within a linear structure. Your energy already holds the answer, but the mind insists on understanding it before allowing integration. This creates tension between knowing and thinking, between felt truth and conceptual certainty. The more the ego tries to resolve this gap, the more persistent the thoughts become. This is why reassurance, distraction, or external validation rarely quiet the mind during this phase. In essence, the obsession of the first separation is not about the twin flame at all. It is about identity encountering unity for the first time. You are not losing control of your mind. You are witnessing the ego struggle to orient itself after divine recognition. You are consciousness momentarily aware of itself through another, and the mind is attempting to place that awareness into a story it can survive. At the beginning of the twin flame journey, obsession is simply the ego translating what the soul already remembers. Before we move into the next stage, take a moment to pause with what you just felt rather than rushing to understand it. Notice how this description resonates in your own body and mind, because awareness is the first step toward integration. If this experience feels familiar, you are not alone, and acknowledging it gently begins to loosen the grip of the obsession itself. I invite you to reflect quietly for a few seconds, and if you feel called, leave a comment sharing what stood out to you or how this phase showed up in your own journey. And if words feel unnecessary, you can simply type, "I am learning to trust what my soul already knows" in the comments as a way of anchoring this awareness before we continue. Section 2. Repeated separations and dualistic rumination. When you move beyond the first separation and find yourself caught in repeated cycles of distance and reconnection, the nature of obsession begins to shift. It is no longer fueled by shock or disbelief, but by a quieter, more persistent mental activity. At this stage, the ego no longer asks, "Why did this happen?" Instead, it begins to judge, compare, and evaluate. The mind slips into dualistic rumination, filtering the connection through concepts such as blame and innocence, fairness and imbalance, effort and expectation. You may notice your thoughts looping around what your twin did wrong, how they should behave, or what conditions must be met before you allow access again. The ego might suggest strategies blocking, withdrawing, setting emotional ultimatums not as acts of clarity, but as attempts to regain a sense of power. This phase is often misunderstood as discernment, yet beneath it lies the ego's subtle effort to control outcomes and protect itself from vulnerability. The obsession here is not really about the twin's actions. It is about the mind's discomfort with uncertainty and surrender. This stage is not asking you to assign fault or decide who is right. It is inviting you inward. Each repetitive thought reveals how the ego has tried to manage love through conditions, timelines, and expectations. What feels like analysis is often resistance to allowing the connection to unfold beyond personal rules and emotional bargaining. Another layer of fixation commonly emerges during this phase, the longing for the twin's physical return. Even as awareness deepens, the focus remains locked onto the 3D person, their presence, their messages, their body, their role in your daily life. The paradox is that while the soul recognizes unity, the mind continues to experience separation. This is where symptom-level karmic lessons arise. Attachment, abandonment wounds, control patterns, and the belief that love must appear in a specific form to be real. Repeated separations are not punishments or failures, they are mirrors. They reveal the deeper karmic structures beneath the surface behaviors, patterns that cannot be resolved by reunion alone. This phase asks you to move beyond reacting to symptoms and begin addressing the root, the need to externalize wholeness, safety, and authority onto another person. The realization that emerges here is subtle, yet profoundly transformative. You begin to see that control was never in the twins' hands. The power to regulate your inner state, your worth, and your peace has always belonged to you. The twin is not the source of stability or disruption, they are the catalyst revealing where sovereignty has not yet been reclaimed. When this truth lands, obsession softens, the mind quiets, and the dynamic begins to shift not because the twin changes, but because you do. Section 3. Ego degradation and the fear of letting go. During the phase of ego degradation, obsession often reaches its most intense expression, not because the connection is growing stronger, but because the ego senses its own unraveling. What you are experiencing here is not attachment in its simplest form, it is survival instinct. As old identity structures begin to dissolve and rewire, the ego grasps desperately for something solid, something familiar. The physical image of the twin becomes the most accessible anchor, a symbol the mind can hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. At this stage, the ego obsesses because it still believes control is possible. It convinces itself that, through constant thinking, analyzing, or emotional fixation, it can stabilize what feels like an inner collapse. The mind returns again and again to the twin's face, voice, or presence, not because they are missing, but because the ego is losing its authority. Fixation becomes an attempt to reclaim ground that is quietly disappearing beneath it. Here, you are brought to a profound crossroads. One path is resistance, questioning the process, tightening emotional defenses, and clinging to familiar patterns of control. The other path is submission, not submission to another person, but to transformation itself. This choice is subtle yet decisive, and the fear surrounding it can feel overwhelming. The ego interprets surrender as annihilation, as if letting go will erase you entirely. Yet submission is not dangerous. It is misunderstood. When you stop resisting the process, when you allow thoughts, emotions, and sensations to rise and fall without interference, the degradation softens, the pressure eases. What once felt like psychological chaos begins to organize itself naturally. Obsession loosens its grip, not through effort, but through acceptance. The mind no longer needs to fixate because it no longer feels threatened. As the ego quiets, something far more stable emerges. Clarity replaces confusion, wisdom surfaces without force. You begin to perceive the connection and life itself from a wider perspective, one not governed by fear or control. The universe no longer appears chaotic or punishing, but intelligent, responsive, and deeply ordered. This stage is not about fixing the ego or eliminating it. It is about allowing it to step aside. This is the moment to soften judgment, to stop narrating the experience, and to let transformation complete its work. When the ego is no longer fighting for dominance, what remains is not emptiness, but a deeper alignment, one rooted in awareness, trust, and inner truth. Imagine someone standing in the middle of a powerful ocean current, gripping a heavy anchor because it once made them feel secure. At first, the anchor seems helpful, it gives the illusion of stability. But as the current strengthens, holding on to it becomes exhausting and painful. The harder they cling, the more the water pulls against them, draining their energy and filling them with fear. This is what ego degradation often feels like. The twin's physical image becomes that anchor, familiar, comforting, and seemingly necessary. Yet the moment the person loosens their grip just enough to stop fighting, the experience changes. The current no longer feels like an enemy but like guidance, carrying them forward with surprising ease. Their body relaxes, breathing steadies. What once felt like drowning becomes floating. In that surrender, they realize they were never meant to control the water. They were meant to trust it, and as they do, clarity replaces panic, and they discover that they are supported by something far greater than the anchor they were afraid to release. Section 4. Obsession during reunion. Obsession during reunion tends to emerge for two closely related reasons, both rooted in deep psychological and spiritual activation. At this stage of the connection, the bond is no longer theoretical or distant. It is present, alive, and emotionally charged. Because of this proximity, the mind becomes highly alert, scanning every interaction for meaning, safety, and reassurance. The first and most common cause is being triggered. During reunion, your twin flame naturally mirrors unresolved inner wounds with remarkable precision. This mirroring is not accidental, nor is it intended to cause harm. It exists for the sole purpose of growth and expansion. You may find yourself obsessing over their tone, their words, their silences, or subtle changes in behavior. The mind replays conversations, analyzes facial expressions, and assigns meaning to small moments, attempting to regain a sense of control. These obsessive thought loops are signals, not failures. They point directly to karmic lessons that are ready to be addressed. Often, they reveal fears of abandonment, deeply ingrained beliefs about unworthiness, or an unhealed dependency on external validation. In some cases, they expose a lack of self-love that has gone unnoticed until the intensity of reunion brings it to the surface. The obsession is not truly about your twin. It is about the part of you that feels activated, vulnerable, and seen. From a spiritual psychological perspective, this is where the ego struggles most. The ego interprets triggers as threats and seeks to protect itself through overthinking and fixation. Yet the soul understands what is occurring. The twin is not causing the wound. They are illuminating it. They are acting as a living mirror, reflecting back the areas within you that are asking for compassion, attention, and healing. In this context, the twin is fulfilling their role perfectly. There is nothing to fix, confront, or control. Resistance only deepens the obsession, while awareness begins to dissolve it. When the ego learns to pause, observe the trigger, and ask what belief or fear has been activated, the energy shifts. Gratitude replaces resentment. Curiosity replaces judgment. By recognizing the lesson rather than fighting the mirror, obsession softens into understanding. Reunion then becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a test of endurance, but an opportunity to integrate shadow and self-love, and to meet yourself with the same compassion you once sought from another. If you have made it this far, pause for a moment and reflect on what has surfaced within you as you listened. Notice where you recognized yourself, where something felt uncomfortable, and where clarity quietly began to form. These realizations are not accidental, they are signs of integration beginning to take place. This journey is deeply personal, yet you are not walking it alone. If you feel called, share your experience in the comments and let your story be witnessed, because expression is part of healing. And if words feel difficult right now, you can simply affirm your awareness by typing, "I choose awareness over obsession," below. Let that sentence anchor your intention and allow this reflection to carry you gently into what comes next. Section 5. Trauma, hypervigilance, and healing. The second source of obsession during reunion is not rooted in love itself, but in unresolved trauma carried forward from the past. When experiences such as betrayal, abandonment, emotional inconsistency, or third-party interference have occurred earlier in the connection, the nervous system does not simply forget them. Instead, it adapts in order to protect you. This adaptation often appears as hypervigilance, a heightened state of awareness where the mind is constantly scanning for danger, signs of loss, or evidence that pain will repeat itself. In this state, every word your twin speaks, every pause in communication, every shift in energy is analyzed and replayed. The mind becomes alert and watchful, not because something is necessarily wrong in the present moment, but because the body remembers what it once endured. Obsession here is not about attachment or desire alone. It is a trauma response attempting to prevent future harm by controlling outcomes through constant monitoring. This form of obsession is still a trigger, and it is still a lesson. It asks you to look honestly at what has not yet been healed within you. However, it does not require you to endure ongoing emotional distress or remain in situations that compromise your well-being. Spiritual growth is not synonymous with self-sacrifice. Sometimes the lesson is learning discernment, understanding the difference between intuition and fear. Other times, the lesson lies in establishing boundaries, prioritizing self-care, or choosing to step out of uncertainty rather than lingering in emotional limbo. Healing in this phase involves recognizing that vigilance does not create safety, self-trust does. As long as unresolved wounds remain unaddressed, the mind will continue to seek reassurance through obsession. When those wounds are met with compassion, awareness, and conscious choice, the need to monitor begins to soften. The nervous system learns that safety can exist within you, not just in the behavior of another. Above all, this stage reminds you of your autonomy. You always retain the power to forgive, to move forward, to pause, or to remain where you are. None of these choices are wrong. They may feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or emotionally demanding, but they are yours alone to make. True healing does not come from forcing outcomes. It comes from reclaiming your authority to choose what supports your peace, your growth, and your wholeness. No matter where you find yourself on this journey, whether caught in longing, moving through separation, tasting reunion, or cycling through the mind's relentless questions, obsession with the twin always leads back to the same foundational truth. The twin is not outside of you. The twin is a 3D reflection of you, of consciousness itself, of the universe experiencing itself through form. What appears to unfold on the physical plane is not an attack against you, nor a test meant to break you. It is a precise and intelligent process happening for you, guiding awareness back to its source. Every trigger you encounter, every surge of fixation, every separation that aches, and every reunion that stirs the heart is part of a self-created awakening mechanism. Nothing here is random. Nothing is wasted. Each moment of rumination is a doorway inviting you to step out of identification with the mind and back into remembrance. You are not being controlled by the connection, you are being shown where you forgot your own authority. The power has never belonged to the other person. It has always resided within you, waiting to be reclaimed through awareness. When obsession arises, it is not a punishment, and it is not a failure. It is a message, a signal calling you back into alignment with who you truly are. It asks you to loosen your grip on the illusion of separation and remember yourself as consciousness in motion, the universe observing itself through human experience. As clarity replaces rumination, you begin to see that nothing was ever taken from you. Everything was guiding you toward yourself, and from that place of recognition, true freedom unfolds. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to anchor it into your awareness. Leave a comment below with the words, "I reclaim my power through awareness." Let it be a declaration not just to this community, but to yourself. If this video supported your understanding, please like it, share it with someone who may be navigating this journey, and continue with the next video below to deepen this realization even further. Until next time, may clarity replace confusion, may awareness dissolve obsession, and may your remembrance of self continue to expand.